Welcome back then folks to day 3 of Special Projects Pack 16, and this one will be a familiar face for many Gran Turismo veterans, at least if you played as recently as Gran Turismo 6 of course. It is the Spoon Civic Type R. So you'll need as the base of this one the 1998 shape Civic in particular, which I think I need to buy a few more of these to do different stuff with because this is the only one I had in my garage. I personally prefer like the 97 shape with the pre-facelift, but this one is of course a Gran Turismo legend, built interestingly to N1 racing regulations, so for one thing in particular you could make an argument for going a bit more upmarket than what I've done, and that is tyres. I opted not to fit it with racing tyres, even though you could say maybe it should have them. The reason why I haven't is twofold. One, it feels kind of overkill, so I've gone for sports tyres instead, and, you know, see what it's like. As it turns out, it doesn't really feel like it needs racing tyres anyway, and also, as you can see, it nestles right up nicely under 500 points, and we'll get to that in a second in terms of how it is there. Now, in terms of the spec, of course, we are using Gran Turismo 6, most recently as the reference, so for weight and for power, it's as close as we can get. So the power is pretty much spot on, it's close enough, but the weight, unfortunately, actually cannot go low enough to be the same as GT6, which is unfortunate, but, you know, there's not really anything we can do about that. Thankfully, the payoff is that at least it means it's under 500 points, so yeah, it's not as bad as it could be. So you want your stage 1 weight, of course. It's got the comfort softs anyway. I've upgraded it to sports hards. As far as the club sports section, I'll just double check on the Ultimate. We've got the high lift cams S, so of course that cancels out the high lift cams here. You want your stage 2 weight. You don't need the power restrictor or the ballast for this one for pretty obvious reasons. As far as the semi-racing stuff, we've got the fully customised diff. I've opted for the manual transmission just to give it a bit more like a raw feel. You could go sequential if you want to. Of course, that will bump up the points though, so you'll have to bear that in mind. We've got the stage 3 weight. As far as the racing stuff, we've got the filter, silencer, manifold, pads and discs. I always like to say it, but it doesn't really matter too much which discs you go for. You could go for drilled, slotted, even carbon ceramics if you want to. It's all up to you. As far as the rest, we've got the clutch and flywheel, the fully customised suspension, of course. Like I said about the transmission, if you want to go for it. I guess you could go for the racing tyres if you wanted to, but that really jumps the point level up. And again, the reason why I think it's probably not so great of an idea to do that is, sure, it's all well and good having a Civic Type R with racing tyres. That would be a lot of fun, but it's a 217 horsepower car, so having the point level too high could end up being less useful than you might think, unless you're driving on somewhere like Monaco, in which case everywhere else you're not going to have much chance to use that kind of handling, and you're just going to lose out on straight line performance. And of course Monaco ain't in the game. So as far as the extreme section, we've got the steering angle adapter for that one, and for the ultimate section, like I said earlier on, the high lift cams. So it is a fairly simple build to do. Of course I will have put a link to the livery, which the player did for this one, in the description. As you would assume, tons of people have done spoon liveries for this one. This one, from what I could see though, out of all the various ones, is the closest, if not the best, for Gran Turismo 6's replica of this one. Some people missed out the spoon logo on the rear window or various other things, so I really like what this player had done. Now, as far as the tuning, you can have it over 500 points, technically, and I believe it was, if I recall, so we'll get to the downforce in a second, which is the main way that you can manipulate that, in a similar way to a recent build as well. Now, as far as the suspension, we've got 105mm. Sounds pretty high, but it really isn't, as you can see in the menu. It's more than low enough. In fact, in GT6, it's probably even lower than that. As far as the anti-roll, we've got 5, then for the dampers, 30 and 40, 2.15 on the springs, slightly different camber front and back, 0.5 on the rear, 1 on the front. Likewise with the toe, I quite often like to do this on front drivers, but we've got it towed in to help with that turn in, 0.10 on the front, no toe on the rear. For the diff, nothing too special, 10, 30, 20. Sometimes I will change it, but for this one, to be honest, it didn't really feel like I needed to do anything to the diff. It already feels good straight out of the crate. As far as the transmission, I've gone for a relatively close ratio, 240, so that'll be down to you, depending on what track you use it on, depending on what kind of gearing you prefer. I know some people like slightly longer gears, so you don't have to change as much, but then of course being a VTEC, it's not a huge amount of torque, it means that you can sometimes bog down a bit, so it depends. I'll leave it up to you, like I said. As far as the power, the ECU, none of that is adjusted. For the downforce, there's no adjustment on the front, but then on the rear, I've got it on 55, as you can see. So if you drop that down, it will be over 500 points, and obviously if you raise it all the way up, it will be the opposite. So again, that's up to you, it's up to your requirements. And over here, pretty simple stuff because it's all the stuff which we've already fitted. So 217 horses, unfortunately a bit too much weight. I don't recall the weight it was in GT6 off the top of my head, but I want to say it was something like 820 kilos, I think, maybe 815, somewhere around there. So it is a fair amount heavier, but it's not like you can do too much about that in this game. So that's it for the build. Of course, we will now jump out to Tsukuba to show you what the car can do in practice. Now, as I often like to say, it's an easy one to talk about. It's just really fun. It's super easy to use. You do not even need racing tyres on this one. I'd be curious to know if you do fit the racing tyres, do you find it even more OP? I would imagine so. But this thing is so good through corners. It's so much fun. It sounds fantastic, of course, as well. It is a pleasure to work with, and I'm not even like the biggest Type R fan, generally speaking, but it is funny how often I really do enjoy doing Type R special projects. For me, when I think of my favourite special projects that I've done, one, for some reason, of the ones which always comes to mind to me is my Mugen RR Civic build, which I actually use a fair amount for front-wheel drive events in career mode. Likewise with this one, it's a ton of fun. In terms of lap time, it's actually fairly close to the Tommy Kyra S13 Sylvia build, which I did a few packs back, so that gives you a rough idea of the kind of lap times you can be expecting, because obviously that thing's pretty damn good through corners anyway, so it's a good comparison. In terms of turn-in, understeer, there's maybe the slightest hint of understeer if you really floor it out of a corner, but even then, for a front-wheel drive car, this thing has fantastic turn-in, very minimal torque steer to be honest, and yeah, it's just a pleasure to work with. So if you are new to special projects, and maybe this is the first one you've ever seen, be sure to check out the other ones this week, still to come, and which we've already done, and of course, stick around for more. But for now, thanks for watching.